What if everything you've lived up to now was just a rehearsal? The diploma, the job, the relationships, the goals. What if your real life has not yet begun? Carl Jung said, life only begins at 40, not because the body changes, but because finally the soul begins to whisper higher than the ego. And when that happens, you can no longer ignore that nagging question, who am I? Really? If that question has touched you, stay. This message is for the part of you who no longer accepts to live on autopilot. Have you ever had the feeling that you are living, but something hasn't really started yet? As if everything you've built so far is part of a great rehearsal, but the main show is still to come. Carl Jung said that life only starts at 40, not because something magical happens to the biological clock, but because until then we live on autopilot, just working, collecting titles, learnings, experiences and masks. Yes, masks. That image we project to be accepted, admired, understood. We call this persona, and as much as it works well on the world stage, it is not who we are. It's just the role we learn to play. But what if, suddenly, this paper began to lose its meaning? And if the applause no longer brought relief, only an echo of emptiness? That's when something different begins to whisper inside. A call that does not scream, but also does not shut up. A strange discomfort, an annoying question. Who am I without the roles that I perform? Perhaps you have felt it, or perhaps you are feeling it now, as if something invisible begins to emerge from the bottom, calm but firm. A silent center that has always been there. Jung called it the self, the true center of the soul, and when it begins to move, the ego shrinks. Do not disappear, but give space. And then comes the chance to live for real. But are you ready to look at yourself, not with the eyes of the world, but with the eyes of the soul? In the first half of life, everything seems urgent. Be someone, have something, get somewhere. We were told that success is climbing a ladder, but no one asked, is this ladder against the right wall? We grew up learning to dance to the sound of expectations, family, society, the world, and we danced well, so well that sometimes we forget who we are when the music stops. Have you ever stopped to think how many decisions you made just to be accepted? How many times you smiled when you wanted to cry, shut up when you wanted to scream, or said yes when everything inside you begged for a no? The truth is that at this stage we are building the ego, and the ego is strained. He wants to belong, he wants to prove value, he wants to show that he knows, that he can, that he deserves it. And he does. He builds a functional home, career, status, routine, responsibilities. But inside, what sustains this structure? Because although everything seems in place, something at the bottom still feels loose, as if we were living a life tailored to please, but too tight to fit our whole soul. Do you feel that sometimes? That weary sigh in the middle of the day? That silent question that insists on coming back? Is that all? Maybe you're not failing. Maybe you're just growing up. And life, quietly, is asking for something more. From the outside, everything seems normal, but inside, something starts to change. It's not noisy, it's not dramatic, it's subtle, and so easy to ignore. A different tiredness, not physical, but of the soul. A nameless discouragement, a restlessness that arises in the silence between one task and another, between a coffee and a scroll on your phone. You feel it, but you can't explain. As if something within you is trying to awaken. It is the call, the silent call of the soul. Sometimes it comes as an existential void that swallows you in the middle of a day. Sometimes as a crisis without apparent reason. Other times it comes in disguise, an unexpected breakup, a disease, a loss, a turn. And in those moments you ask yourself, why is this happening to me? This is not happening to you, but to you. What if these collapses are in fact invitations? Invitations to turn inside, to hear what you have silenced for so long, to get out of the surface and dive in. Jung said that symptoms are the language of the soul when it is not heard. So what is your soul trying to tell you? Maybe it's not the end of the world, but the beginning of a new world within you. There comes a time when the old structure begins to crumble. The persona, that well-polished mask, begins to crack. Not because it failed, but because it fulfilled its role. It brought you here. But from now on, it is the soul that must lead. This moment is the true birth, not the birth of the body, but of consciousness. Jung called this process of individuation. It is the way back to yourself, not to the ideal self, but to the whole self. It's not an easy path. It's uncomfortable, often lonely, because in it you need to welcome what you have always tried to hide: the shadow, the contradictions, the regrets, the silenced desires, the traces of light that you never had the courage to recognize. Everything that you pushed under the carpet now wants to dance with you. Do you have the courage for this meeting? Because to identify yourself is to accept that you are not only light nor only darkness. It is accepting that there are parts of you that still hurt and others that still sleep, but all deserve space. It is a process of unlearning, of letting go of certainties, of crossing fear, to walk with humility inside yourself until you find the integrity that has always been there, hidden under the rubble of the character. Have you ever felt this call? Have you ever felt that there is something within you that has not yet been born, but is ready? Individuation does not happen in a single day, but it begins the instant you stop running away. Not everyone answers the call, not everyone crosses, because the ego resists. He fights tooth and nail to keep everything the way it always was. Even if it hurts, even if it no longer makes sense. He fears the unknown, tremble at the idea of losing control, because the ego feeds on security and the self offers freedom. But freedom requires detachment, and the ego clings to everything, to titles, old stories, labels, to that false feeling of knowing who I am. And when the self begins to emerge, calm, deep, authentic, the ego panics. It creates distractions, busy schedules, soulless projects, social networks, shopping, promises, escapes. Have you ever found yourself running away, not knowing what? Have you ever found yourself filling all the spaces, afraid of silence reveal what really matters? This is how the ego tries to protect its empire, but the self does not give up. He does not fight. He does not force. He just insists, with presence, with truth, with that discomfort that does not go away, no matter how much you try to anesthetize. And gradually, something inside of you begins to realize it is not a crisis, it is a crossing. In the eyes of the ego, it is the end. But for the soul, it is the beginning of everything. Something changes at 40, not in the body, but in internal time. It's as if life said, we have reached the halfway point. And now? Will you continue to live to survive, or will you start living for real? At 40, we have already learned to build. We know how to build careers, form families, meet goals. But now it's time to rebuild. Rebuild bonds, but not with the world, with the soul. To ask again, what has real value for me? What would I do if no one was looking? Who am I when the applause ends? It is a turning point. The moment we stop running behind and start walking inward. It's not about destroying everything that has been done. It's about transforming the foundation. Exchange the haste for presence. Exchange the having for being. Exchange the recognition of others for inner integrity, because living for others is exhausting. But to live according to oneself, not in selfishness, but actually, it is liberating. Can you hear this silent turn? This call that does not shout, but echoes deep, inviting you to slow down. Look at yourself tenderly, return to what is essential. At 40, the soul wants more. No more things, more consciousness, and it is only when we accept this crossing that life finally begins to gain meaning. Deep down, all the soul wants is to go home, not a physical house, not a place in the world, but an inner space where everything that we were, are, and will be can coexist in peace. The soul does not want to erase the past. It wants to integrate it. She wants to look back without pain and forward without fear. At 40, the call is not to grow old, it is to mature. It is to make sense of chaos. It is to transform scar in wisdom and silence towards. The journey changes. It is no longer a race for success and becomes a journey in search of truth. Do you feel this silent desire to take off the masks, to abandon the character, to simply be? This is what the soul is talking about when it provokes you in the middle of the night, when it makes you cry without explanation, when it whispers that something needs to change. Ignoring this call can keep the appearances, but also get sick inside. Attending to it is rebirth. It is to cross the fire and find that there is something in you that the fire cannot burn. Because when the soul comes home, it no longer needs to prove anything. It only needs to dwell, breathe, live, not to impress, but to exist with integrity. And then, life really begins. And you, have you ever felt this silent call of the soul? Have you ever wondered if you are living an authentic life, or just playing a well-rehearsed role? What within you has not yet been born, but is ready to emerge? If something in you was touched by this text, do not ignore it. Comment here which part has impacted you the most, or with which part you identified more. Share with those who may also be crossing this internal crossing, and leave in the comments your voice. As small as it sounds, it can echo in another soul that needs to hear. After all, life, when lived from the inside out, turns even silence in direction. Are you ready to take the next step? See you in the next video.